My friend Brian said he's not sure what I'm going to say, and I had to echo the same sentiment. I've been wrestling with this, obviously, because I knew I was going to do the last talk, trying to wrestle just how to deal with that. But I have to tell you, first of all, how excited and encouraged I am by you people. Because one of the things that comes up universally among all of you the last 3 days is that you're joining the conference. Is that fair? Yeah. And the aspects of that impact me, it isn't that you like the conference, it's that lives are being changed. People are being impacted. That is what this is all intended to be all about. And so, on the one hand, we've had a lot of talks, and I think many of you have taken advantage of having the recording so you can listen to them through the next week or two, which is, I missed many because we had other board meetings going on and so forth, but I didn't worry about that because I'm going to personally go through each one as I have some time over the next 2 weeks and study them carefully, because some of the best talks that we've had have come off in the last few days, so that's a very special thing. And so I hope you had that same reaction, and I hope that it continues to have an impact on your life. But that still leads me to some other summary kinds of statements. Because on the one hand, I'd love to give a real rah, up, let's go kind of closing, but I can't do that honestly with you. Because I harbor the feeling, the belief, that the times that are on the near horizon are very uncertain. Not necessarily black, but certainly not positive. It's pretty confusing. For example, I'll give you one example. But I think because that they always ask me about this because they know that we moved the ministry down. We have a second base for us, of course, in New Zealand for the last few years. People ask me, where's the safest place for an American to be? And they're shocked when I give them the answer. The most dangerous place for an American to be is in the womb of his mother. He's got 1 chance in 5 of being murdered. 1 chance. We talk so much about the 6 million Jews of the Holocaust. We don't talk about the 60 million that our political environment has encouraged and finances itself by selling baby parts, body parts. And there are actually people that try to support that as something other than an immoral act. And that's just a reality. Now, I'm not just trying to pick on that issue alone, but that tells you that there's something really, really wrong fundamentally. It isn't a single group, it was certainly a particular advocacy. Something much deeper is going on here. That's adverse, that's bad, that's evil. And we could dwell on that. And you've heard me before as I go through my encroachment of darkness talk. You've heard me say that for several years. The whole fact that we have executives that flaunt the law, and no one cares. We have legislators that sign laws they don't read. Insanity. We have judges that are at the highest pinnacle of the law. Ignore the law. Trample the law. I grieve for those that feel that selected law as a profession that feel the betrayal that has gone on this past year. That's very fundamental, not just a decision here and there. No, there's something very fundamental that got destroyed recently. And the other thing you never hear anyone talk about, when they talk about Obama, some say he's stupid. No, he's not stupid. Not at all. He's following a published agenda that has as its objective the destruction of America. That's published. Do your homework. I'm amazed at even how his critics on the airwaves never mention that. They criticize him, his poor judgment, no strategy. They don't connect the dots. No, he's doing exactly what his agenda requires him to do. It's all been published, nothing new. Clone Piven, there's several versions of it. You can check it out. Now we're going to be heading into, a year here, an election year, and a lot of these issues, hopefully, will be aired and discussed and so forth. And there'll be a lot of opinions there. Now the question that I'm sure is in your mind, it certainly is in mine, but I personally would be insincere with you, and that's not one of the, I may not be correct, but I don't want to be insincere with you. But I personally find it hard to believe that it can be turned. I personally harbor the fear, if I can use that word, not the right word, is that it's too late. I strongly suspect, I don't know, but I strongly suspect that the abandonment wrath of God has already started against our country. And if it has, it doesn't surprise me. If you were God, how would you feel if your word was prohibited out of the schools? How would you feel if your presence was prohibited from any public expression? Would you salute the flag as it went by? I don't think so. And we could go on and on about that, I suppose. But by the way, let me never be on the presumption that there isn't room for repentance. And that's still a hope we can have. And when I say repentance, I don't mean among the non-Christians. There's something else we should keep in front of us. We're all very fond of quoting 2 Chronicles 7:14. And I'm among those for many years that endorse the idea that that's valuable to us today. God appeared to Solomon on a specific context, but he declared a principle. That if my people who are called by my name, now that's a narrow group of people. If my people are called by my name, that does not refer to our politicians, to the people in office, to the executives of the entertainment industry. You make your list. That's not who it's addressed to. If my people who are called by my name will do 4 things, I'll do 3, God says. If they'll humble themselves, we know how to do that. And pray, we know how to do that. Those are things we know how to do. We may not do it enough, but we know how to do that. That's not rocket science. They'll humble themselves and pray, and seek my face. Whoops. That's not a head thing. That's a heart thing. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, here's the rub, and turn from their wicked ways. Notice which wicked ways he's talking about. It's not the sins of the public, of the secular world, or any of that stuff. It's the sins of his people who are called by his name. Those are the things that need changing. If they'll turn from their wicked ways, really, then God will do 3 things. Then will I hear from heaven. Apparently not until then. His ears are deaf in the meantime, at least in the corporate sense. But then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sin, praise God, and heal their land. Can he do that today? How many think so? My hand is up too. My hand is up too. I don't want to create a false expectation here, don't misunderstand me, but I certainly want to acknowledge that he's the one in charge. It's not Barack Obama. It's not the liberal left. That's another, we really are victims of vocabulary. The gays pawned off homosexuality and managed to get that stick, and people speak about gays. That's nonsense. We're victims of our vocabulary. We keep calling them liberals. They're not liberal. They don't agree with you. They won't endorse it unless you agree with them. That's not liberal, by the way. There is a term for what they do, and it's not liberal. They have an agenda. And that agenda is to separate you from your heritage. There's a name for that. It's called subversive. They're not liberals, they're subversives. And they're successfully destroying our entire culture, apparently. So that's what we're facing. It's not trivial. It's heavy stuff. It's real stuff. But our focus, in my mind, is not on a politician. I think we all have those that we sort of respect and those that we hope for, and that's all great. That'll come and go as we go in the next year or so. But our hope isn't in any of them. Right? Our hope is not in any of them. A couple that I'm quite enthusiastic about, but I'm not foolish enough to think they can change it. God can. He's the only one that can. Will he? I don't know. Tell you something else, it doesn't matter. Part of what I'm convinced of, and I'm going to try to find a way to talk about that a little bit, is I don't think it matters. Because every one of us in this room, me included, have a calling that we need to discover. And they're all different. And God has a program. I don't know what's going to happen. My personal presumptions are they're going to be fairly turbulent, fairly dark coming. Okay, they are what they are. He's in charge. Our job is to be prepared for the storms that are coming. Our job is not to predict the future. That's prohibited in the Torah. Prediction was divination. That was capital crime. God holds that office privately of knowing the future. So prophecy is not about knowing the future. Prophecy is to understand God's plan so he gets the glory when it happens. But it is our job to prepare for the coming storms. That's a little different kind of a thing. So, well, one other thing, there's a number. I'm also going to use this closing opportunity to answer some of the questions that people have thrown at me, and there's another thing that I might share with you. We all have our personal prayer habits and style. I'll share with you. It's really a private thing, but those that know me well or not, so they know about this. I try to open and close every day with a very simple little psalm. Okay? It's my paraphrase of Psalm 103. Okay? Psalm 103 goes essentially like this. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Notice who the prayer is addressed to. Not him, it's me. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. The good, the bad, the whatever. Whatever's in me. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that's within me. Bless his what? His holy name. That's pretty cool. That's where I focus and start. And again, bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. And from that point, I literally modified as I go to put those benefits that happen to be on my consciousness at the moment. Who has forgiven me all mine iniquities. And I usually insert here in my paraphrase of Psalm 103, and he's forgiven me all mine iniquities, and they are many. I remind myself of the many things he's forgiven me, which is a reminder for me of people that I need to forgive. I've had a number of betrayals, big ones, in my life. Many in the family. And this is my reminder that he's forgiven me more than I could possibly forgive them, and I need to be reminded about that. He's forgiven me all mine iniquities, and they are many. And he healeth all my diseases. He provides all my needs. And not only that, he guides all my steps. And that's breathtaking. There's part of this that I usually don't get into, but as simply as a demonstration that I regard you as family. I've had a number of conversations last few days with a number of you. I think you recognize I do not consider this a public audience. I feel this is a private, and I'm going to impose on that a little bit. And I'm going to talk about a few things that I don't talk about except to my inner group, very, very close inner group. But after thinking about it, this might be the right place to share that a little bit. Most of you who've studied 2 Corinthians 12, first 4 verses, may recall that Paul recounts an event that occurred in his life that he describes only very briefly. It impacted him enough that he remembers it after 14 years, the event he recalls. He first describes it as if it happened to somebody else, but you quickly realize that's just his way of putting it in the third person. It's really himself that he's talking about. Whether I was in the body or out of the body, I don't know. He had some kind of rapture experience that he got into and came out of, and he makes reference to that. In August of 2014, I got up in the middle of the night. I'm at that age level. Yes, I'm $79.95 plus shipping and handling. Okay. Okay. Which means I have, what do you call it, prosthetic sleep. In other words, I typically sleep 2 hours at a time. Okay? And that's just part of the lifestyle of someone that's old and decrepit, you know. So I'm used to getting up for about 2 hours, you know, relieving the bladder, going back to bed. And that's the way I sequence myself. And that's just part of, it's usually 2-3 hours at the most. Well, it was one of those mornings. It was 4 a.m. I got up, went to the convenience, and then as I often do, I'll stop by the kitchen for a glass of orange juice or a glass of something before going back to bed. Okay? And I did just that. I stopped, had a little glass of orange juice, and I'm on my way back in the hallway to my bedroom when I experienced what I presumed was a stroke. I was really captured. But it was a strange experience. It wasn't frightening. It wasn't bad. I found it exciting. Something's going on. To be honest with you, I thought I had a stroke and died. I mean, I thought it was that severe, and yet I thought, wow, is this the other side? It was a positive thing. I know that sounds strange. I'm just being candid with you. It's just really what... As I experienced that, I realized something was going on. In retrospect, I'm convinced that it was an interdimensional transfer of some kind. But what was interesting, I immediately knew certain things. I knew I was not young or old. I knew I had no age. I didn't ask a question and have an answer. In fact, I didn't see anything or hear anything through the experience. But I did have immediate transfers. Those are things that I didn't have to ask, I knew. And I also got instruction. It's very vivid to me. That's why one of the reasons I'm bringing this up. I don't know how many of you are sailors. How many sail or use ships? You know, as you know, I'm Naval Academy. So those idioms are familiar to me for a lot of reasons. What I had impressed on me is steady as she goes. Hold the course. Okay? In other words, take advantage of a deep keel. To put it, these are all terms that would be immediately imputed in seamanship terms. As I'm absorbing that, and by the way, the whole experience was not negative. It was very, in fact, when it finally ends, I felt disappointed. I frankly was fascinated in trying to analyze what on earth is going on. It's not the rapture. I tried to, had all these hypotheses. I was just experiencing. When it was all over, I'm standing in the hallway, and I hadn't made it to my bedroom yet. I didn't lay down. I wasn't dreaming. I turned back to the kitchen I'd just come from, and there was my little glass on the counter where I had obviously drunk some orange juice. And I was really so stunned by the experience that I made 2 phone calls, middle of the night. One of them was to Dr. William Welty, who I regard as the greatest living exegete alive today in Hebrew and Greek. And he's a very close friend, and he's on my board. I shared with him what happened, and he had his immediate analysis for it. He confirmed what I was suspected. He also answered, one reason I called him, I was familiar with 2 Corinthians 12, verse 4 verses, where it says that Paul speaks of that experience, and he makes reference to words that it's not lawful to utter. Strange, in the King James, is a strange passage. And I suspected that may be a marginal translation. That's another reason I wanted to get Williams, what does the ISV say, kind of question. And he came right back at me, no, what it really says is communication without the encumbrance of language. It's a little different sense in the actual Greek as it's picked up in the King James. And also another one of I called Brian Hughes. These two are close intimates on my board. And they both all had the same analysis. I obviously sat down with a pad and wrote down everything I could think of that I had experienced and what happened while it was all fresh in my mind. And as you can probably gather, I've gone double back on this many times since. For a number of reasons, I don't speak about it. There's probably less than 5 people alive today that know the story, because we just felt that it seemed more appropriate to keep it very private. Partly because it can be easily misunderstood and whatever. So, however, there's another reason that's emerged in our thinking that causes me to take the liberty of trying to share this with you a little bit without getting into the subtleties of it. It has stunned us on the board, because my board members, obviously, among those intimates of what I'm talking about, because we realize that it's not many ministries that have the benefit of an overt confirmation. Because basically what was being said was, hold the course. Don't deviate from the course that you're on. You know, that's huge direction to a helmsman, okay? And so it's interesting, from the date of that experience on, the ministry has been exposed to a number of changes and turmoil, and there have been some betrayals and other things, and that's all been cleaned up, gone very smoothly. But that also led to a series of events that I used to explain in my first talk. I think I got into that, how 5 different major ministries sought us out to deal with our eschatological instruction. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to review I think the first talk I gave, I went into all of that for some other reasons. But the point is, it's interesting, subsequent to that experience that we had in August of 2014, we've had 5 different major ministries come to us at their initiative, for their initiative. In their words, they announced publicly to their multi-million-dollar audiences that they were wrong. They've asked us to come in and correct, and a display of candor and humility that just is breathtaking. Not 1 or 5 of those. Different in a sequence over the last year. And that's what gave rise to my talk the first of the three times that I've addressed you. And so, but it's something else that I think we've all experienced is something we dream about in these conferences, and that's the koinonia. We've often had agendas of outstanding international speakers, and they've been, this is the 10th year. The platform has become a very coveted platform. That's all wonderful. But I think I'm being honest and accurate when I say this is the first time we've really felt koinonia among the people. Am I right? Am I hearing you? The Lord has blessed us with the Spirit among ourselves here. There are people here that have benefited from the last 3 days for things totally outside our agenda, our speaking list. I'm not disparaging it. I'm just saying there's something additional, perhaps vastly more relevant that's been going on. So it's in honor of that I feel I could perhaps indulge in a little candor about where we're coming from. We are, as a ministry, and I'm speaking, we have two different boards. We have a board for the United States, Koinonia House, USA, has its board. And we have the Koinonia International Trust of New Zealand is a separate legal entity, so they each have they're almost the same, but they each have their boards. And it's during these days that we have our talk, we also we have several board meetings going on while we're going on. But one of the things that we wrestle with is we feel blessed in that we've had the course we're on confirmed. Hold the course. Take advantage of a deep keel, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. So we have to somehow pray that through. What does that mean? In order to hold our course, we have to know the course we're on. And the course seems to be a very conservative, eschatologically forced, relevant path. But that also raises some other questions of direction and the rest. One of the other things that we realize we have not done is really take advantage of our silver and gold medallion holders. A lot of people work really hard to go through their bronze, and that's fun, and they're generally very excited about that. Silver is a little more of a challenge because there's been some confusion, but we're getting that fixed. But going to gold is an undertaking vastly more substantial. And I felt very self-critical of ourselves that we don't have more plans for taking more advantage of them and doing that better. Because my presumption is our long-term value is the quality of the gold medallion holders that, emerge from our program. And the numbers are very modest so far. They're growing, but that's fine. At the same time, I began to realize our problem is we don't take advantage of them. One of the things we're going to start doing that we haven't been doing is empaneling our gold medallion holders. There's over a dozen of them that would be glad to meet and help and guide. And if we need new, fresh ideas, that's where they should come from, not out of our board. You follow me? We've had it upside down, so to speak. And so we'll be making some changes in that regard. But that leads me to another issue that I've been negligent in. One of the things that it may be a form of pride that we should be ashamed of. But we've taken pride that we don't solicit donations. We welcome them, obviously. We open the door for them, obviously. But we sort of avoid soliciting funds. And as I examine ourselves in that, I suspect that's a form of misplaced pride. Because we have needs and we don't talk about them. We don't let people. I've had several old friends among us this past 3 days come up to me, people that are not strangers, but they ask me Chuck, what do you need? What can we do to help? And I realized I didn't have a thought-through answer for them. I came across kind of stupidly. Here's people that have means that are looking for ways to help us. You would think, oh, hey, I have a list right here. I was very absent responding to them. And so I thought, gee, nothing else before we leave, I should at least mention a few things. And so I'm going to call it special projects. It turns out that we are in the center of the North Island of New Zealand. It also turns out that New Zealand has available geothermal power. And that can be used for heating during the winter. It can also generate electricity. It turns out to be very simple. You dig a hole no more difficult than a well hole, and instead of putting a pump down there, you put a transducer and take the heat. And if you can go a little bit deeper and it's the right place, you cannot get down and just heat. You can get electricity if you want. Now, it turns out that a substantial portion of New Zealand has geothermal power. We also discover that the place we happen to be located is in the most ideal location to take advantage of geothermal. Okay? And we also discover that if people applying to take advantage of that, if they are a lodge, they have preference. Duh! So our guys have done a little bit of research, and it's our understanding, there's still some uncertainty, there has to be some surveys, and similar to any well digging, you're not dealing with certainties here. But geothermal power, it turns out that for a budget of less than $200,000, and that's because there's lots of deferred maintenance within the lodge itself that it would also have to be repaired anyway. So about half of that is really deferred maintenance. But the point is, for in the neighborhood of $100,000, we can test, sink a hole, put a transducer down there, and have geothermal power for the lodge. Now we have a heating bill. It runs $5 or $10,000 period. Anyway, the point is the whole thing would pay itself off relatively quickly, because the maintenance is very simple. It turns out once you've got it set up, it's pretty simple, and there are specialists that deal with it, and so that happens to be something that people say, Chuck, what can you do? I don't know why it didn't occur to me. See, we don't have the capital to undertake that. We've done enough research to know we can do it. We haven't had the capital or the commitment to write a check to really sink some holes and make the measurements and follow through. But it's our estimate that's $100,000 to do that, and we probably will incur about another $100,000 of deferred maintenance. We have about 19 units that would take advantage of this, but the plumbing is old and needs to be fixed anyway. So that's a double hit. So for somebody, if that's something we're asking for prayer on. There's another issue. I have probably 100 boxes of my books that have been shipped to New Zealand, and they're sitting in a steel storage unit. Can't get at them. They're in boxes. Now, they're not essential. We could do a lot of our stuff is available on the internet and so forth, but at the same time, we have, of those 100, I'm guessing there's roughly 100 boxes, probably a third of them should be thrown away. It's old stuff, it doesn't matter. But there is a good chunk of that are irreplaceable books that are no longer in print. Stuff I've collected since I was a teenager. And I'm frustrated because I remember, but I don't know where it is. I can't get at them because they're in boxes. There's nothing more useless than books stored in boxes. Even if they're at least on the shelf, you can browse, okay? But the idea of having a building that's weather protected, that has shelving, so we can get that on the shelves and have students or whatever, do it in a controlled manner so that we have a card file, or there are better ways to do it. But the point is, getting our library or archives unpacked is something that hangs overhead, because it turns out there isn't any space that lends itself to doing that there at the moment. So it means we've got to build something. Exactly how big it has to be, how expensive, not sure. This is just a top of the head guess. It might be a little more than that, but I'm assuming a budget for that would be enough to build, a solid, sealed, weatherproof place where we could make a library. And our students, at the moment, it's embarrassing because most of the stuff that I know I've got in there somewhere are in one of those boxes. And so I have not let them get at them unless it's accompanied with a plan. Something that'll keep them under control, not just, And so that's an art thing. Another thing that I just mentioned, one of the things, people say, what can they do to help? One of the things we would like to be able to do is offer programs to people who can't afford them. There are students that show real promise, that get to a point where they can't go further. It wouldn't take a large fund to have a scholarship fund of some kind. So far, we haven't had the capital cash flow to. We have some small ones, but not. It's an open-ended thing. But I mention it because as people, if there's some of you thinking, what can you do to help us? Let me give you the agenda. Number one, the thing you can do is pray for us. We really believe that God answers prayer. So let's just start at the top. But the other thing you can do, if the Lord puts it on your heart, there are projects. This is just a few that I threw together earlier today because I realized I don't want to lose the audience without at least having some suggestions. But for what it's worth, that's the end of it. So the good news is that's the end of the slides. So I thought that would be a welcome thing. So I wish there was a way that I could communicate to you how encouraging you have been to me the last 3 days. The kind of feedback you've given me is just breathless, staggering. I don't think the recipients of those medallions the other night, I don't think the recipients have any idea how encouraging their getting that award is to us. How validating that is to what we're doing. The thing we'd like to see is more of that. One of the things we'd like to see is more of you taking courses. Many of you have gone through to get the bronze, and that's great. That seems to be a popular, satisfying thing. How many have taken bronze? How many bronze have you had? How many have enjoyed it? Praise God. Okay. I won't ask for a show of hands of how many of you are going to silver. Because many of you who have tried have discovered it got kind of confused. Some of my materials were self-contradictory and they were not constructed properly. And I thought we'd fix some of those. We discovered by our board is looking at it more closely, they still need to be repaired, and they will be in a matter of days, not weeks. Okay, so they're going to fix that. And one of the ways we are dealing with the silver program is to create some alternative paths, a very simple path around any of the others, if you like that better. And we've got some very simple ideas that we want to announce properly, not as a half-baked hip shot here, but there's some alternate paths that will make the path to silver much clearer, more attainable, and get that out of the way on your path to gold. And one of the things I'm going to suggest, those of you that have been blessed by our ministry, I'm going to ask you to pray about, among other things, pray about committing yourself to go to a gold medallion level. And use that commitment to have God tell you what your calling really is. One of the things you'll be asked to do in any case, if you're on the path, usually by the time you get to silver, you're being asked on a piece of paper to simply tell us what you believe you're being called to. We believe that every one of us in this room has a calling. And the challenge of life is to discover what that calling is. And your understanding of that calling isn't static. It's a moving thing. And one of the things you can be praying for is that it be clearer to you. But find out what your calling is. Because what we regard is the implied contract between us. If you tell us what you believe you're being called to, our commitment is to help you prepare for it. We'll try to contrive or get together those things that would be apparently the appropriate thing to help you prepare for the calling you feel called to. But the important point is every one of you have a distinctive calling. There's probably not two identical ones. Some, maybe several that are similar, but the point is, no, you have a distinctive calling, and the challenge, that's why I lean so much. I thought I put it in here, but it's not important anyway. My favorite quote by Mark Twain. The two most important days in a person's life are the day he's born and the day that he discovers why. Do you know why God saved you? He had a reason. And it's my belief that he has a very specific mission. And you're challenged to find out what it is. Some of you find it out fairly early in life, and boy, that's a blessing. Others of you may not find it until very late in life, and it comes as a surprise. Okay. The main idea is that you find out what it is. And when you do, take it seriously. How do you take it seriously? Pray about it. Keep it in prayer. God will clarify. God will bring the resources in the picture. Which leads me to another. There's several questions I'm reminded that I was asked that I may not have answered properly. Somebody asked me the other night, one of the questions had, what were the most surprising things that I've learned this past year? Remember that? That was one of and I think I answered it several ways. But it occurred to me later, the biggest one I didn't mention. I have discovered something in my life. I've been a Christian now for 65 years? And I've had my ups and downs, and I've obviously had to revise my perspective as I've grown and learned. My hermeneutics have gotten increasingly tight and strict, and I think that speaks for itself. But there's something else that I've discovered about God. I mentioned this the other night, that I discovered he has yearnings. Remember? I was amazed that the God of the universe has yearnings. I just couldn't get used to the concept that God has something he yearns for. And it turns out he does. He talks about it in John 17, and we talked about a specific one that he has. But as we got into that topic, I was reminded later there's an aspect of him that I'm quite serious about, and I regard it as a major discovery about him. For reasons I don't understand, God seems to have a need to be trusted. I'm fascinated with the observation that I've experienced in my 65 years. I think back again and again in so many ways. God seems to hunger for being trusted. I'm convinced, serious, I may sound facetious here, I'm trying to be quite serious. I'm convinced that God every day finds a new way to ask me the same question. Do you trust me? Every day he finds a different way to ask the same question. Do you trust me? Sometimes the response, you can think of it, you can label it different ways. Faith, hope. You put other different labels, but he seems to have a very, I'll use the term desperate in an adjective sense, a desperate need to be trusted. He seems to hunger for our trust. As I've discovered that, it fascinates me that he seems to need me to trust him. Boy, that turns out in my life to be dominant in my horizon. And I don't know if that's going to confuse you or help you, but I have to just tell you, I'm convinced that for some strange reason within the courtship that's going on, he has a desperate need to be trusted. That seems to be the highest and best thing I can do for him, is to trust him. Obviously, by being obedient is part of that. But it fascinates me to see that as the emergent dynamic in our relationship. And so I leave that with you to think through. But I think the one thing I hope you carry away from our relationship these last 3 days, 4 days, whatever, is to confirm your calling. Find out what God specifically has called you to. And then, of course, take it seriously. How do you take it seriously? Well, one thing you do, learn more about it. And one of the things I'm hoping it'll do for all of you is that it will cause you to continue your programs with us in the Institute. If you're not taking a course, take one. There are lots of easy ones, small ones, whatever. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Although I think you'll discover the fruitful ones are the ones that are part of a sequenced program of some kind. But I think I'm hoping that every one of us in this room will go forward with a renewed commitment to put him ahead in priorities. That's his way of asking you, do you trust him? Some of you have needs that are really pressing. Well, God wants to see how you deal with that. And each of you, everyone, every person's different, but I think that's the basic question God's going to answer. Boy, so let me leave you with that. I will leave you with a commitment to pray for us. We look forward to seeing you those of you that have signed up for the cruise tomorrow. We'll have some time together with the speakers on the lake. That's always kind of fun. And I've overstated. I overrun a little bit, haven't I? Okay. I can't put this in my baby book. I'll have to run again.